Pride High, Book 5, Blue. Written by J. Bell. Narrated by Talia Carver. Chapter 1, November 8th, 1993. Boys. Magnificently masculine, annoyingly unavailable, heart-breakingly hot boys. Why did they have to be so elusive? One in particular. Mindy Beaumont grabbed her backpack off the bed, intending to begin the walk to school, when Diego's photo caught her eye. She had taped the Polaroid to the edge of a mirror, where the pictures of her other friends created a sort of frame. That he was now included among them was bittersweet. Until recently, she'd kept Diego's photo in a drawer, only taking it out to entertain various fantasies. Swaying in his arms during prom, the spotlight shining on them alone. Basking in the afterglow of their first time together while tangled up in freshly laundered sheets. Trembling with delight when he proposed to her in front of the whole school during their graduation ceremony. Watching him carry their daughter on his strong shoulders as they strolled through a park. Mindy had created entire lives for them to share, and the crazy thing was, they had actually started down that path. Mindy sat down in front of the mirror, bringing her eye level with the photo, while remembering how she had danced with Diego and kissed him repeatedly. None of that was a fantasy, the chemistry between them undeniable. He'd wanted more, and yet, Ricky. He'd been so heartbroken over losing Diego, especially after being forced to spend the summer in another state. Even before all that drama, Ricky's first year in Kansas had been a rough one, resulting in a suicide attempt. Mindy had taken all of that into consideration when making what she felt was the right decision. Then why did it feel so wrong? She sighed while staring at the photo. Diego had been sitting backstage in her makeup chair when it was taken. His smile was cocky, a hint of amusement in his penetrating gaze. The brown skin of his strong features was a welcome contrast to her own. She still remembered how good his thick lips had felt when pressed against hers. Mindy let herself imagine where else his mouth might have gone if given the opportunity, and how she might have reacted, before a noise downstairs brought her back to reality. She noticed the time and stood, checking her appearance once more on the way out, despite that seeming pointless. Diego didn't care how she looked now that he was back with Ricky, and even if he did, Mindy shouldn't be vying for his attention. Not when she'd had her chance and given it to someone else. That wouldn't be fair. She had made her bed, both figuratively and literally, and at the end of the day would sleep in it without complaint. For now, she took the steps two at a time on her way downstairs. Her dad stuck his mostly bald head into the entryway. "Need a ride to school, hon?" Steve asked. "It's getting awfully cold out there." "I don't mind," Mindy said while pulling on her jacket. "I like the walk." "Are you sure?" She pretended to think about it. "I suppose it would be convenient if I had my own car. You know, like the one Jessica got on her 16th birthday?" His eyes widened in panic. "You mean your sister, who is currently costing us a fortune in out-of-state college tuition?" Mindy sighed dramatically. "I'll stop by the grocery store after school and see if they're hiring. If I work hard between now and graduation, maybe I'll have enough saved up for a used bicycle and a year of community college." "That's the spirit," Steve said before handing Mindy a sack lunch. "Don't forget to set a little aside for a tent, so you have somewhere to live. Your mother and I might not be married anymore, but we're still looking forward to being empty nesters." "I'm running away from home," Mindy said with an eye roll. "Don't you dare," her father replied before kissing her on the cheek. "Have a nice day, Pumpkin." "You too, Daddy." Mindy had a spring in her step when she left the house. In truth, she'd never been fussed about getting her own car. Her parents always let her borrow theirs. When it came to her future education, that was difficult to figure out. None of her friends had made firm plans yet, and she didn't want to leave them behind, or this town. Mindy had lived in Pride her entire life, and because of that, she really should have known better. November was not a warm month in Kansas. The trees were increasingly bare, and the sky was gray. When a light drizzle began, she pulled her coat tighter and hugged herself against the chill. She was already halfway there, which made turning back pointless. If only she'd brought an umbrella. By the time she got to school, her hair would be plastered to her face. Mindy picked up the pace, only slowing again when she heard the rumble of an engine. A sports car with mismatched panels pulled over. Her heart began to pitter-patter until the passenger side window rolled down, revealing Ricky's happy smile. "Need a lift?" he asked. "Yes," Mindy said, hustling over. Ricky began to unbuckle his seatbelt until something distracted him. Diego, as it turned out. Because the driver's side door opened, his massive form stepping out and extending to its full height. He was so big, and always so warm. But she didn't allow herself to hug him, even though she wanted to. "A carriage for the princess," Diego said, bowing slightly and gesturing for her to enter. She scrambled into the back seat, which wasn't very spacious, but was more than enough to suit her needs. "My heroes," she said. "I didn't expect it to be that cold, or wet." "It's pretty gross out," Ricky agreed, beaming at her from between the front seats. "How do you usually get to school in the winter? Because we could give you a ride every morning." He looked to the driver. "Right?" "Of course," Diego's deep voice rumbled. That was generous of him. Not so long ago, Ricky had been told to walk home so that Diego could drive Mindy to the public library. The tables had turned, and she'd been the one kind enough, or perhaps foolish enough, to spin them around. "That's okay," she said diplomatically. "Keisha already offered." Diego's eyes met hers in the rearview mirror. "Yeah, but she's coming from the other side of town. You're on my way." "Only because you picked me up," Ricky said, smiling at him. "Keisha should give you a ride. I'll pick Mindy up from now on." "In what?" Diego challenged. "This car. You'll loan it to me, right?" "You don't even have your license." "So what?" Ricky retorted. "That's just a piece of plastic people are forced to pay for. It's a scam created by the government. It doesn't mean someone really knows how to drive." "Actually, I think it does," Mindy said from the back seat, but it was hopeless. "You're right." Diego seemed impressed while sizing up Ricky. "It is a scam." "So can I?" "What?" "Borrow your car." "Not a chance in hell." "Aw, come on. Let me babysit Frankenstein." Ricky stroked the dashboard lovingly. "I'll take good care of him." "I'd like to see your mother's face when you pull up in this thing," Diego grumbled. Ricky grinned. "Then it's a deal?" "No." Mindy laughed. They were a perfect couple, making it impossible to resent what they had together. If only she'd gotten the chance to be not so perfect with Diego before they'd hit it off. "Hey," Ricky said, spinning around to face her again. "We could give you a ride home after school as well, since we're all in the theater group now." Keisha was too, and could just as easily provide a ride, but Mindy decided not to point that out, mostly because it would mean spending a little more time around Diego each day. She noticed him watching her in the rearview mirror. Mindy nibbled her bottom lip before nodding. "Okay." "Hooray!" Ricky said. "This is going to be fun. Diego never wants to play any driving games with me." "Driving games?" she asked. "Yeah, you know, stuff like I Spy with my little eye, except for grown-ups. My favorite is Spot the Serial Killer. They move amongst us in the daylight, you know. What might seem like a harmless commuter could be the next Jack the Ripper." Diego shook his head. "Maybe you should sit in the back seat from now on." "Never!" Ricky cried. Then he considered her sheepishly. "Although, I guess it would be fair to take turns." "That's okay," Mindy said quickly. Even in her most depraved fantasies, she'd never wanted to share Diego with him. Ricky had every right to sit next to his boyfriend. The word filled her with yearning. Junior year was almost halfway over. Would she finally be able to say that she had a boyfriend of her own? So far, she had been on scattered dates with guys who turned out to be gay. The one exception wasn't worth remembering. Then there was Diego, but that ship had sailed. only to moor itself tantalizingly on the horizon. She caught him watching her in the rearview mirror again. Diego didn't try to hide the fact. Instead, his eyes began to smolder. "Too bad Cameron won't let us pick him up," Ricky said, leaning to the side and wrapping himself around Diego's arm. "Then we'd be one big happy family. Wouldn't that be nice?" "If you say so," Diego responded, his attention finally leaving her. She watched Ricky sit upright before taking his hand, and how Diego moved them both to the stick shift when necessary, causing his boyfriend to laugh as he switched gears. His gaze didn't return to the rearview mirror, which was probably for the best. No, it was definitely the right thing. Even if she changed her mind now, Mindy didn't want to stand victorious with the wreckage of their relationship strewn about her feet. That would be horrible, but she also didn't want to torture herself any longer. Most of her friends had paired up. It was time for her to as well. As they pulled into the school parking lot, Mindy assigned herself a new mission. Before the school year ended, she would find herself a boyfriend. Not because she was somehow incomplete without a man. Mindy simply wanted another crack at love, certain there could be no nobler pursuit. November 8th, 1993. Love was the dumbest thing ever. The idea might sound good on paper, but people didn't realize what they were getting themselves into. Omar sure hadn't. He did not want to be someone's boyfriend, which was a convoluted way of admitting to himself that he didn't want to date Whitney anymore. The mere thought of breaking up with her made him feel like a jerk because she'd done nothing wrong. In fact, that was the problem. Whitney was cool, like really, really cool. Currently, she was outside the school doing kick turns in a circle around him while trying to get the hang of ollies. Whitney was pretty as hell, actually thought his jokes were funny, and was one of the weirdest chicks he'd ever met. If someone had told him when he'd started high school that he'd be desperate to break up with a girl like her, he would have laughed his ass off. And yet here he was. Whitney ground to a halt in front of him. "You know what would be amazing?" she asked. "If someone rode around with a skateboard tied to each foot." Omar narrowed his eyes. "Wouldn't that be like normal skates?" "Would it, though?" Whitney said in enigmatic tones. Maybe you're right. Hey, sorry I've been so busy lately." Whitney gave him a blank expression, like she wasn't sure what he was referring to. Then the bell rang. They had 5 minutes to get to their first classes. "See you later." His girlfriend smooched him before pushing off and spreading her arms wide. She screeched like an eagle as she went. "So damn cool," Omar said, shaking his head at himself. He'd be crazy to break up with her. And yet, he scanned the throngs of students converging on the entrance, hoping to catch a glimpse of his very own Jennifer Connelly. He didn't see Sylvia anywhere, although he did spot another dark-haired beauty. Omar skated over to his best friend. Anthony was arm in arm with Cameron, who was glancing around like a Secret Service agent. "Hey," Omar said when hopping off his board. "Can I walk him to class?" "Just grab hold of my leash," Anthony replied with a smirk. "You look good in a dog collar," Omar replied. "It would suit your new style." Anthony had dyed his hair black over the weekend, his torn-up, worn-down clothing matching from head to foot. "You might be onto something," his best friend replied. "I don't think there's anything in the dress code that forbids it. A dog collar doesn't count as jewelry." "He was kidding," Cameron said, sounding on edge. "No, I wasn't," Omar replied. "Hey, I almost forgot. My sister left this in my bathroom. I don't care if the lighting is better in there. If it's in my territory, it belongs to me." He dug a tube of lipstick out of his pocket and handed it to him. Anthony gasped in excitement. "It's black." "Yeah, she only used it on Halloween. I don't think it'll be missed." "She might want it back when she sees how good it looks on me," Anthony replied. "You can't wear that here," Cameron warned. Anthony patted his arm. "Don't worry, I'm all about following the rules." "So can I?" Omar asked again. Cameron turned to his boyfriend with concern. "I'll see you after second period," Anthony said before releasing him. "Okay?" Cameron nodded, barely contained irritation on his face when he glanced at Omar, but that wasn't unusual as of late. "Did I interrupt something?" Omar asked. No, he's just feeling protective. Which is exactly why Omar had asked permission. Ever since Troy and his goons had beat up Anthony a week ago, precautions were taken to make sure he was never alone between classes. His friends had each volunteered to walk with him, Omar taking the route to and from lunch, but some things were too important to wait. "I don't think it's working," he said. "Whitney didn't even know what I was talking about." "That makes two of us," Anthony replied. "I didn't call her back over the weekend," Omar explained. "We didn't see each other at all, and she's not even a little pissed at me." "I guess you'll have to try harder," Anthony said as they navigated the hallways. "Get her guinea pigs drunk and hit on her mom? That should do it." "Or," he said meaningfully, "you can just be honest." Omar was already shaking his head. He didn't have a good reason for breaking up with Whitney aside from the truth, which she would definitely take personally. "Sorry, it's not you, I swear. I just want to be with someone else." He could imagine how that would make him feel. No matter what a girl said to reassure him, he'd still compare himself to the other guy. "I don't want to hurt her." "So instead, your master plan is to be such a bad boyfriend that she breaks up with you?" "Exactly," Omar said, nodding rapidly. "It's gotta work." "It might," Anthony conceded. "But isn't that hurting her in a different way?" "I guess so, but Whitney hating me is better than making her feel rejected." Anthony stopped in front of his locker. "That's both extremely misguided and oddly sweet." "Thanks," Omar said with a grin. "Can I put my board in your locker?" "Of course. You know the combination." Anthony stepped aside, his gaze remaining trained on him. "The question," he said when they resumed walking, "is if you're willing to be as bad as it takes." "I don't know," Omar replied. "It would help to know if Sylvia is still into me." Anthony snorted. "Are you forgetting when she tried to kiss you at the Nirvana concert?" "That doesn't mean she's interested in getting back together," Omar said dismissively. They stopped near the entrance of a classroom. "She might only want my body." "It's your fault for being so hot," Anthony said with half-lidded eyes. Omar puffed up his chest. "I guess it is kind of a curse. I never know if people really care or if they're just after my sausage." Anthony laughed. "Maybe, like me, it's a little bit of both." "Will you ask her?" "Sylvia? Ask her yourself." "I tried. She just keeps saying how happy she is for me. Please?" "All right," Anthony sighed dramatically. "But only because you're my best friend." "Hell yeah, I am." They bumped elbows before parting. Omar already felt better as they went their separate ways. Anthony would figure out all the complicated stuff and make it easy. Although he couldn't do the hardest part for him. If it turned out that Sylvia really was interested, Omar would need to somehow break up with Whitney without hurting her. There had to be a classy way of handling the situation, the sort of thing only a mature junior like himself would think of. Hey, maybe he should stop showering. November 8th, 1993. Cameron watched the clock, his body tense. He'd already shoved everything into his backpack, which sat on the floor next to his feet. As soon as the bell rang, he grabbed it and dashed for the door. Once out of the classroom, he broke into a full-out run, wanting to maximize his progress before the halls became too congested and forced him to slow. Even then, he darted around people, nearly tripping a few times, until he reached the hallway that Anthony was already walking down. Alone. "Hey," Cameron panted when nearing him. "What are you doing? You're supposed to wait by the door." As always, when the subject came up, Anthony's expression was patiently amused, like he was humoring everyone who was trying to help him. Doesn't it make more sense to meet you halfway?" "No," he said with a little more emphasis than he'd intended. He fell in beside Anthony and took his hand. "Just wait for me. It's more romantic that way." Nice save. The truth was, the break between second and third period was one of the most dangerous. Cameron was already scanning the hall as they walked. He half listened to Anthony talk about the latest albums he was reviewing for the school newspaper, while the rest of him remained on high alert. Sure enough, when they turned down the next hall, he saw Graham Fowler and his cronies. Trader Dave, as Omar had taken to calling him, was with them. Cameron wasn't worried about their former friend as much as the other guy, who was just as massive as Graham, and had likely been one of the cowards who ganged up on Anthony. Cameron didn't envy his chances of taking on either of them. Both would be impossible, which made it all the more important that he was there to protect Anthony, especially when dealing with someone like Graham. Troy Mitchell, who Cameron despised even more, was at least predictable. He wouldn't make a move out in the open. That would be too damning. Graham wasn't so strategic. Instinct drove him more than thought. "I almost don't want to like the Smashing Pumpkins," Anthony was saying. "That I do anyway proves how talented they are. I've only heard Siamese Dream so far, but I think they can give Nirvana a run for their money." He seemed oblivious to the way that Graham was glaring at them. "I'll ask my mom to make one for Thanksgiving," Cameron replied. "What?" Anthony asked. "A pumpkin pie," he said, watching Graham from the corner of his eye until he disappeared. Then he turned his full attention on Anthony. "That way you don't have to buy one." His boyfriend studied him for a moment before laughing. "That's all right. I guess you'll read it in the paper." Cameron shook his head in confusion. "I think I misheard you. Sorry." "Don't worry about it. We really should make some plans for Thanksgiving, though. I like how we all got together last year. That needs to become a tradition." They discussed ideas while walking the length of the school. Cameron dropped off Anthony at his class. Transitioning from a smooch to a sprint, the hallways mostly clear again, he hauled ass down the main corridor, ignoring a staff member who told him to slow down. Despite his best efforts, the bell rang halfway to Cameron's next class. When he finally arrived, everyone was seated and the teacher had already begun the lesson, which ground to a halt as he sheepishly walked into the room. "Mr. Huxley," the teacher chastised. "I thought we talked about this last week." "We did," he said, hurrying to his desk. "I'm really sorry. It won't happen again," the teacher interjected. "That's what you said on Friday. Do you remember what I told you then?" Cameron swallowed as he sat at his desk, his face burning because everyone was staring at him. "That if I was tardy again, you'd give me detention. But—" "No buts," the teacher scolded. "Your behavior is disrespectful to me and those who are here to learn. I expect better from our student council president. Stop by my desk at the end of class to collect your detention slip." The snickers around him were silenced when the teacher raised his eyebrows. Cameron was soon forgotten as class resumed. Most of the lesson was lost on him. He was too preoccupied with trying to find a solution. He clearly couldn't make that run and still be on time. He'd tried enough to know that it wasn't possible. If only he could explain his reasons. But Anthony had sworn Cameron to secrecy. Mr. Finnegan didn't know, neither did Charles. Maybe if he told this particular teacher and asked for just a few extra minutes each day to keep his boyfriend safe? Somehow, he didn't think he'd get much sympathy. Not like he would if he were dating a girl instead. Cameron felt glum when the class ended. He didn't have to worry about Anthony at the moment. Omar always walked him to lunch. He waited until his own break before going to the payphones to let Charles know that he'd be an hour late to work. The worst part is that he couldn't even tell him the reason behind his punishment. "I was late to class too many times," he said lamely. Charles was understanding about it, at least. Cameron went to the outdoor courtyard, where he always met his friends, although they probably wouldn't be able to keep doing this much longer, not with the weather turning colder. "There he is," Mindy said, waving at him from one of the concrete benches. "I asked my dad to pack an extra brownie for you." "Oh, nice," he said. "I could use an extra treat. Guess who got detention for the first time?" Diego snorted. "If you made it to junior year without getting in trouble, then you're doing something wrong." "Or something right," Keisha countered drolly. "Maybe you could take a few pointers from him. How many times have you been suspended now?" Diego made a show of counting on his fingers before he shrugged. "Who the hell knows? So what are they throwing you in the hole for, Huxley? Too many tardies?" "Lock him up and throw away the key," Keisha cried sarcastically. "I'm so happy the rules of this school keep me safe from people like you." Cameron laughed, feeling a little better. "It really sucks," he said. "Not the detention so much as the reason. I'm trying to protect Anthony. You guys are too. We're all walking him to class, right?" "He's my hallway buddy on the way to our creative writing elective," Mindy said cheerfully. "I've got him on the way to theater class," Keisha added with a nod. Diego averted his eyes. "Well, I have him after U.S. history," Cameron said, "and have to pick him up from his algebra class. Then we have to walk to his English class before I double back for pre-calculus." He could see Mindy working out the route in her mind before she blinked in surprise. "That couldn't be worse." "I know," he said miserably. "I can't skip it, though, because we always pass Graham Fowler on the way. Do any of you have classes that are closer?" The others went over their schedules, all except Diego. Cameron wasn't surprised that they couldn't find a better option. They'd been over this already when setting up the plan. "Maybe you could change your schedule?" Mindy suggested. "I already did once so I could take student government," Cameron said doubtfully. "I guess I could try, but..." He looked to Diego in desperation. "What's your second period class?" "Algebra," came the reluctant reply. "So, you're in the right neighborhood," Keisha pointed out. "Hey, he's not my friend," Diego shot back. "But he was," Mindy said gently. Diego glowered at them while shoving the rest of his sandwich in his mouth, so he was no longer free to speak. "That's okay," Cameron said. "I'll figure something out." Despite this promise, he couldn't let the idea go. He needed help, and if anyone stood a chance against Graham and his hulking carbon copy, it was Diego. When the bell rang, Cameron decided to risk being late. "Do you have a second?" he said, staying close to him after the others said goodbye. Diego cocked an eyebrow. "Yeah, and that's all you'll need, because the answer is no fucking way." "You know what they did to him," Cameron said, not fighting the emotion in his voice. "And you helped him before, when they pushed him down in the hall." "Hey, I did that for me," Diego said, jabbing himself with his thumb. "I can't stand those assholes." "Me neither," Cameron admitted. "So let's ensure they don't get their way. Anthony isn't backing down. He's still making himself a target." "Sounds about right," Diego grumbled. "And I know part of you must still care, because if you hate Anthony so much, why'd you step in last year before they had a chance to hurt him?" Diego clenched his jaw. "Next time, I'll wait." Cameron slowed. "Will you really?" Diego glowered at him, then he averted his gaze. But not before a tiny iota of sympathy was revealed there. "I'll make it up to you somehow," Cameron said, leaping on the narrowing opportunity. "How exactly?" He shrugged. "I don't know. I'll take you out for ice cream?" Diego snorted. "I'm not a little kid anymore." "Then we'll do something better than that. Whatever you want. My treat." He watched as Diego molded over. "I guess it would be cool to hang out sometime," he grumbled. "So you'll do it?" Cameron asked, already breaking into a grin. Diego rolled his eyes. Then he sighed. "Yeah, fine. Just tell me where I need to be." Cameron already felt better while explaining everything to him. He was less certain after they parted. Anthony had a sharp tongue and a never-ending supply of opinions. And it wasn't that long ago that Diego had chased Cameron around a grocery store, knocking over displays in his rage. When he tried to imagine Anthony and Diego together and unsupervised, Cameron grimaced, hoping the maddened expression would hide his rising panic. Chapter 2, November 8th, 1993. When the final bell rang, Anthony experienced a surge of relief. He was hardly alone in this sentiment. Not many people mourned the end of a school day. But he craved that freedom more than ever, because soon he could be himself again. Almost there. For now, he only needed to pop in his earbuds, play some tunes, and wait by the classroom door like a good boy. Sylvia showed up not long after, since her sixth period class was closest. "Who are you listening to?" she asked. "Billy Corgan and the Squished Squash Band," he said jokingly. "Again?" He nodded. "I might give the Smashing Pumpkins my coveted Album of the Year award." "Wow," Sylvia said as they walked down the hall. "My vote would go to P.J. Harvey." "Great choice," Anthony said, nodding in approval. "Both are sophomore albums. I think we can officially bury that theory in the backyard." "After putting a stake through its heart," Sylvia added. They kept talking music on the way to the parking lot. Once there, they stood by Anthony's car. Cameron soon sprinted over to them. "Bad news," he gasped. "I got detention and have to go there right away." "For what?" Anthony asked in disbelief. Cameron was one of the nicest, most considerate people in their school. He couldn't imagine any reason he'd get into trouble unless... "Too many tardies," Cameron said casually, choosing that moment to smile in greeting at Sylvia, which meant he wasn't looking at Anthony, whose stomach sank. "Because of me?" he asked. After his boyfriend winced in confirmation, Anthony shook his head. "Okay, this has gone far enough. I can walk to class on my own." Cameron held up his palms. "The good news is that I already found someone to take my place, so this won't happen again." "Who?" Sylvia asked. "I've really got to go," Cameron said, already turning away. Anthony grabbed his hand. "How long does it take to say a name?" Cameron considered them both, then he licked his lips. "Diego Gomez." Anthony blinked before he started laughing. "How did you manage that?" "He's my friend. I asked him for a favor. Now I really have to go." Cameron kissed him and ran off. Anthony stared for a moment. Then he turned to Sylvia. "Did I just hear that right?" "Which part?" she asked. He shrugged, struggling to take it all in. "I really don't need a chaperone," he said as they got into his car. Sylvia waited until she was buckled up before she replied. "Mindy liked it when we did this for her." "I welcome any excuse to be around you guys," Anthony assured her. "I just don't want to feel like a victim." Which he had all last week. Stripped of his makeup and anything even remotely feminine, he'd gone to school each day with a bare face, swollen and raw from what they'd done to him. Sometimes he could still smell the rich soil that caked his nostrils that night, and tasted in the effort it had taken to breathe, which became so difficult with the weight of his assailants spinning him down that he'd expected to die in that cornfield. Almost subconsciously, he grabbed his eyeliner from the center console and drew strength from it. "Do you mind?" he asked. "Of course not," Sylvia replied, before flipping down the sun visor on her side to reveal a small mirror. He did the same, comforted when he saw the recently dyed black hair. That had been his mother's idea. He should have listened to her sooner, because it did make things easier. Anthony had worn his hair this way for most of freshman and sophomore year, so, if anything, it was a return to form. Most guys at his school would never dream of dyeing their hair, dismissing it as something only girls did. And best of all, it bent but didn't break the new dress code. Black was a naturally occurring color, so even Principal Preckwinkle couldn't object. Anthony carefully applied his eyeliner before intentionally smudging it, and felt better when he considered his reflection anew. It was like putting on a comfortable outfit after wearing something itchy and constraining all day. His attention flicked to the parking lot. Troy Mitchell and his girlfriend, Faith Song, were passing the front of the car. Anthony smirked. Then he pressed on the horn. The pedestrians flinched when hearing the honk. Troy made a face. Anthony waved at him with a friendly smile. Then he grabbed the lipstick Omar had given him earlier and started putting it on. Troy rolled his eyes and, taking his girlfriend's hand, resumed walking. "You shouldn't provoke them," Sylvia said. "What's he going to do? Tattle that I put on makeup in the parking lot?" "Maybe," Sylvia said. If he did, Anthony would start doing it across the street after school in full sight of the building. Troy could get makeup banned from the entire town and the whole damn state, but even then Anthony wouldn't quit. "I thought you wanted this to stop," Sylvia said, having noticed his fierce expression. "I do," Anthony said, his tone softening. "But I also want him to see that he didn't break me." "What if that encourages him to try again?" Sylvia asked. Anthony pressed his lips together. "Then he'll have to kill me." "Or," Sylvia said pointedly, "you could go to the police and file a report." "That's not an option I suggest lightly. I understand wanting to keep the authorities out of your personal business." Anthony shook his head. "Pressing charges will only make it worse. They'll hate me even more, and have another excuse to do something terrible." "They called the police on Ricky and Diego." "And I called the police when Troy had his party," Anthony said, his stomach beginning to fill with anxiety. "So we're even now. It's over." Sylvia was peering at him. "Hey, I really like how that looks on you." Anthony checked the mirror. The black lipstick matched his hair and clothes, and the eyeliner. "I like it too," he said in surprise. "We'll see what Cameron thinks. For now, I better get you to work." He turned the ignition and began the short drive downtown, the brief interaction with Troy still on his mind. He really did want to put an end to the bad blood. For his own sense of security, Anthony needed to know that another nasty surprise wasn't on the horizon, that there wouldn't be a next time when someone he loved got hurt instead of him. That would take more than simply keeping his head held high. "So, what's he like?" Anthony asked. "Troy, I mean. He's in your student government class, right?" "He's a jerk," Sylvia said bluntly. "Yeah, but I don't know. There must be more to him. I need to find some common ground." Sylvia studied him a moment. Then she exhaled. "He's crazy about Faith. They're always touching and kissing and stuff. I think it's gross, but he really does seem to feel something for her, even if it's just hormones." Anthony nodded. That was at least relatable. He was constantly lusting after Cameron. "What else?" Sylvia thought about it before responding. "He's one of the few people who asks questions and takes notes in our class. I get the sense that he's trying to figure out how he can use the rules to benefit himself, but maybe that's the case for most politicians. I'm no different." Anthony glanced over at her. "Because of your parents?" Sylvia nodded. "I want to be prepared if something ever happens to them. Even if it doesn't, laws need to change, because they aren't always fair." "No," he agreed. "They aren't. I'd like to marry Cameron someday. Legally, I mean." "Then maybe you should take the class with me. You can sit next to Troy, since you like him so much." "Shut up," Anthony said with a laugh. "I'm trying to change things too, in my own way. Can you think of anything else?" You could ask Mindy. She got to know him a little before the date turned ugly." That was a timely reminder of what sort of person Troy was, and enough to make Anthony doubt what he was trying to do. Maybe he needed to start slower, like with Diego tomorrow. He shook his head in disbelief, as if he needed his life to get any more complicated, or weirder. Anthony felt his spirits lift when he parked in front of Right Round Records, his own sacred space where he could escape from the turmoil. so he was none too pleased, after walking into Sylvia's workplace with her, to find one of the song sisters already waiting there. November 8th, 1993. Sylvia kept her attention on the only customer in the store. She wasn't too familiar with Hope Song, who kept her hair shorter than her sisters and didn't talk as much. Keisha was romantically involved with her. Sylvia wasn't sure how deep that went. Part of her didn't want to know. "What's she doing here?" Anthony whispered from across the counter. Sylvia shook her head while chewing her bottom lip. So far, Hope had silently browsed the vinyl records, always with her back to them. "I don't know," she murmured, steeling herself. "But I'm going to find out." Sylvia was casual with her approach. She went to the aisle across from Hope and pretended to organize the inventory. Then she made a show of noticing that a customer was there and walked over, as if that hadn't been her primary goal. She was still the master of deception. "Can I help you find something?" Sylvia asked. Hope barely glanced up before shaking her head. She just kept flipping through records, one after another. "I'd be happy to make a recommendation," Sylvia tried again. "No thanks," Hope replied. "What sort of music do you listen to?" "I don't." Hope drifted down the aisle. Once she put enough distance between them, she resumed browsing. Sylvia turned a quizzical expression on Anthony and noticed how vulnerable he looked. This had gone on long enough. She marched down the aisle, intending to tell Hope that she wasn't welcome here. Before she could, the door to the store opened and Keisha came rushing in. She seemed relieved rather than concerned when spotting Hope. "Hey!" Keisha said, her eyes moving between the two of them. Sylvia wasn't sure who the greeting was intended for. "Can we get out of here?" Hope murmured. "Of course." Keisha glanced in Sylvia's direction with unease. "Did something happen?" "No," Hope replied. "I just want to go." Sylvia raised her arms before dropping them again in a "what the hell" gesture. "Actually," Keisha said, "why don't you wait for me next door? I'll buy you an Italian soda." "Fine," Hope said before swiftly departing. Keisha watched her go. Then she opened her mouth as if to explain. Sylvia shook her head to stop her. "Anthony," she called, "could you watch the store for a minute?" "Sure thing," he said, looking pleased as he darted around the counter to the other side. Sylvia brushed past Keisha on her way out the door. As soon as they were on the sidewalk, she spun to face her. What was she doing here? "We needed somewhere safe to meet," Keisha began. "Somewhere safe?" Sylvia shot back incredulously. "How do you think it makes Anthony feel to have one of them show up here?" "To be fair," Keisha said, "Hope didn't beat him up. She refused to be a part of it." "How heroic," Sylvia snapped. "She saw something terrible about to happen and walked away." Keisha grimaced. "Hope wasn't there for that part. In fact, she's the one who warned us about what her friends were up to." "Fine," Sylvia conceded. "But why meet her here? When we're at school, her sister's never far away. We only get a split second to communicate, and this is the first place I thought of. My apologies. I can see now that it was disrespectful to Anthony, and to you." "To me?" Sylvia spluttered in confusion. "Well, sure. We do have some romantic history, no matter how small. I hope I didn't make you jealous." "This isn't funny." "Of course not. But did I?" Sylvia rolled her eyes. "Maybe just a little, but that's not why we're standing here now." "Of course not," Keisha said, much more humble in tone. "What happened that night makes me sick to my stomach. I should have thought of that before suggesting she meet me here. I won't make the same mistake again. But believe me, Hope isn't like the others. I wouldn't be with her if she was." "I still think you can do better," Sylvia replied evenly. "Lord knows I tried," Keisha said, eyeing her a moment. Then she exhaled. "I wasn't trying to upset anyone. I really am sorry." "It's fine," Sylvia said. "You better not keep your date waiting." "I can spare another minute," Keisha went inside the record store. Sylvia followed. She watched Keisha walk around the corner to hug Anthony. "Sorry, hon," she said. "I didn't realize how meeting her here would make you feel. That was dumb on my part." "It's fine," he replied, not seeming upset. "But I'm afraid this area is for employees only." "Understood," Keisha said with a smirk. She nodded cordially at Sylvia on her way out. "Did we just witness a secret tryst?" Anthony asked when they were alone. "Yes," Sylvia replied tersely. "I really don't know what Keisha sees in her." "Can I ask you something?" Anthony didn't wait for an answer. "Do you still have the hots for her?" "Yes," Sylvia admitted. She fantasized about Keisha often enough, and when they hung out together, romantic tension remained between them. Anthony leaned against the counter, his back to the store. "Then how come it never happened? If you don't like that she's with Hope, why don't you make a move?" "Because it wouldn't be fair to Keisha," Sylvia said, her cheeks flushing. "Well, why not?" "I'm not ready to move on yet." "Because you're still in love with Omar?" Sylvia began stacking newly arrived cassette tapes. "I didn't say that," she replied vaguely. "Listen." Anthony leaned to the right, so she was forced to look at him. "If you're not over him yet, who knows? Maybe he feels the same way." Sylvia gave up any pretense of working. "If that's true, then why is he still with Whitney?" Anthony shrugged. "I don't know. They do have a certain chemistry, but if he knew that you were willing to try again—" "I already was. Remember, at the end of sophomore year? Omar wanted to take things slow, then he started dating Whitney." "Maybe he was on the rebound." "Well, he seems to have landed." "More like he got stuck somewhere," Anthony murmured. "If he knew that you were still interested—" "I suppose it wouldn't hurt to drop a few hints," Sylvia said, pretending to mull it over. "Like when he was still in an open relationship and I kissed him, or at the Nirvana concert when I tried again, even though he was already dating someone." Sylvia shook her head, her blush deepening. "I can only imagine what he thinks of me. I cheated on him when we were together and tried to get him to cheat after he moved on. That's why Omar is with Whitney instead of me. I'm a homewrecker." Anthony studied her a moment, then he laughed. Sylvia did too. "He's obviously happy," she said once they had calmed down. "Which is good. I'm happy for him. I don't need to fill some sort of vacancy just because we broke up, or throw myself into another relationship. Unless you'd be willing to break up with Cameron for me, then we can talk." "Oh my God, you are a homewrecker," Anthony said, feigning concern. There wasn't any attraction between them. She'd thought differently at one time, back when she was still figuring out who she was. Now she knew. Sylvia was more in touch with her feelings than ever, and was certain that she wasn't ready to move on because she did love Omar. Enough that if he ever had a moment of weakness, Sylvia wouldn't hesitate. Consequences be damned. November 9th, 1993. Diego left his algebra class without having learned anything, despite this being the second time he'd taken the course. Or maybe it was the third. Whatever. He already had all the math skills he needed, enough to invoice for the repair work he did. Diego sometimes wondered why he bothered showing up for school at all. He used to like getting away from his home life. That wasn't so much of an issue now. He supposed he'd miss some of the people here. But not all of them, he was reminded, when noticing Anthony waiting by a classroom door. His former friend was glancing around with an eager expression. There was no love lost between them, which meant Anthony had an agenda. Something complicated that he wanted to discuss, because like Ricky, there were always way too many questions bouncing around in that skull of his. Diego sighed and walked over to him. "Hey," Anthony said when spotting him. "I really appreciate—" Diego held up a hand.
let's establish some ground rules, he grumbled. Number 1, no talking. Number 2, I'm not doing this for you, so don't act grateful or anything tedious like that. Number 3, don't slow me down. No detours. As soon as we make it to your next class, you're dead to me. Now come on.
Anthony stared for a moment. Then he nodded without saying a word. Maybe this wouldn't be so bad after all. He fell in beside Diego, which felt weird, especially without Omar there, since he'd always been the glue that held them together. Diego scanned the halls, not expecting any trouble. Anthony tensed when Graham Fowler came into view. The prick had a satisfied sneer on his doughy face, the ruddy skin beneath the sweep of blonde hair turning a shade darker when he noticed Diego. His own expression remained cold. Why reveal how much hatred he harbored? He'd find out, though. Graham would have to make the first move, but once he did, he'd discover the inferno just beneath that layer of ice.
Which one of them beat you up?
Diego asked. Anthony opened his mouth before pressing his lips together.
Fine, we'll change rule number 1. Only speak when spoken to.
I'm not sure which of them it was, Anthony replied. I only know that after I ran away, Troy was the one who caught me. I spent the rest of the attack face down on the ground, or balled up. Diego felt his stomach lurch, but he tried to ignore the sensation.
Why didn't you fight back?
Are you kidding? Maybe if it was just me against Troy. Anthony shook his head, as if even that would have been too much. Graham was with him, and the big guy he was walking with just now.
Jerome. He's an asshole. We were on the football team together. He cost us a game once when he flipped out and broke a linebacker's nose on the other team.
Anthony swallowed. He didn't say more.
So, it's just the gay thing that pissed them off?
Diego asked. He wasn't making conversation, he assured himself. Now that he was involved, he needed to understand the situation.
Or did you smart off to them?
A little of both, maybe. I think the makeup upsets them most. He assessed Anthony, whose face was bare. Aside from a tangle of friendship bracelets on one wrist, all of them probably from Omar, he didn't have on any jewelry, not even earrings, despite his lobes being pierced.
So why are they still messing with you if you stopped wearing that stuff?
I haven't. Not outside of school. I'd keep wearing it here, too, if not for the new dress code. Who the hell actually followed those kinds of rules? Anthony wasn't a complete pushover, though, since he was still willing to be a freak despite everything. Diego had always known there was something funny about him. That he was into guys had been clear from the beginning. But even then, it had always felt like he was putting on an act. They walked in silence until reaching their destination. Anthony turned to face him rather than going inside the classroom. His bottom lip was trapped beneath his front teeth, like it was the only way to stop himself from blabbering.
Out with it,
Diego growled. Anthony took a deep breath. Do you remember the first time someone called me a fag? It was at the public pool. You were there. Diego didn't react. Anyway, Anthony said, I had stared too long at a guy that I found attractive. He noticed and said, "What are you looking at, faggot?" I was so scared. Not because I thought he was going to attack me. I felt exposed, like the secret was out. I barely let myself think about it back then. You and Omar being there made it even worse because I didn't want you guys to know. But you stepped right in front of me and said to the guy, "Try calling me that." He backed down, of course. I've been thinking about that lately because he struggled within himself a moment. Because that's the sort of friend I should have been to you when you're...
Rule number 4,
Diego interrupted.
No talking about my dad.
Anthony nodded. I just wanted to say thanks. And that I'm sorry. Diego huffed and rolled his eyes. He felt like he was standing on someone's porch after a date that he couldn't figure out how to end.
No need to get emotional, he replied. See you tomorrow.
Anthony nodded and, thank fucking God, didn't say anything else before he finally entered the classroom. Diego was lost in thought as he walked away. He didn't remember that day at the pool, but it sounded about right. Diego's father had instilled a sense of loyalty in him, which only made it sting that much more when his supposed best friends didn't pay it back. The stupid assholes. Diego would have taken on anyone who messed with them. Back then, at least. Although, if he'd been in the corn maze the night Troy and his friends ganged up on Anthony, Diego's fists clenched of their own accord. Because he still gave a shit about Anthony? That would be crazy. He was probably just itching to take out his frustration on Graham, who had tattled on him and Ricky when they were messing around in the locker room, and whose family had ensured Diego got locked up because of a dumb prank. Anthony had nothing to do with it. If some random guy he didn't have a grudge against started picking on Anthony, Diego wouldn't care. Like if he was walking down Main Street and saw a bunch of college guys pushing him around. Diego's fists clenched again. God damn it. Chapter 3. November 8th, 1993. Ricky was ridiculously happy, and it made him nervous, because his life had been anything but easy since moving here. Then again, what he'd once thought of as a new town now felt more like home. He had an amazing group of friends, understanding parents, and best of all, Ricky had a boyfriend. The hunkiest, moodiest, most dangerous guy he'd ever met. The attraction went so much deeper than that, because beneath all the muscle and bone was a heart in need of love, and nobody was more qualified to give it than Ricky. He would never run out. Not for Diego. "Just a moment," Miss DeVille said, bringing him back to the present. He was in the school auditorium, seated next to Whitney on the stage by some fake rocks. "While I'm pleased with how quickly you've both learned your lines, the emotional resonance is still off. Is there a reason for your smile, Ricky?" "Just one," he replied goofily. "Set it aside. A mere day or two ago, your character barely survived a plane crash. Now you find yourself far from home with precious few resources. More than any of the other boys, Piggy has the intelligence to recognize just how dire his situation is." "And you're not exactly popular," Whitney added. "That's a very astute observation," Miss DeVille said with a nod. "Piggy is the most desperate to befriend Ralph at the beginning of the story and rarely leaves his side." Ricky didn't have to dig deep. He still remembered how intimidating those first few weeks of high school had been, especially with a guy like Diego picking on him. Hey, they could use that old dynamic during this production of Lord of the Flies, since his boyfriend had taken the role of mean-spirited Jack Meridew. Too bad Cameron wasn't playing Ralph. That's who Ricky had glommed onto at the beginning, even though they'd only interacted through a chat room. Cameron had been a reassuring presence regardless, making him laugh and restoring his faith in humanity. Ricky loved him for it, and now he simply needed to transfer that affection to Whitney's character. "Got it," Ricky said with a nod. "Can we run the scene again?" "Absolutely," Miss DeVille replied. "Let me really see those feelings," Keisha added from next to her. "Not just on your face. What do you do with yourself when feeling scared?" Ricky thought about it and pulled his limbs in close, and when delivering his lines, kept swiveling his head around as if worried about being attacked. When added to the emotional state he was supposed to be in, this was a lot to keep track of. Diego made it look so easy. He just sauntered up on stage and became someone else. No, that wasn't quite right. He embodied the character, so it didn't feel artificial. "Better," Miss DeVille said at the end of the scene. "Why don't you take a break? I'd like Keisha to help me with Simon's exploration of the island. I still think we might need to cut that scene, or do a voiceover." "We can tell the whole story with his body language," Keisha insisted. He left them to debate semantics and followed Whitney backstage. "You did great," she said, offering him a high five. "Acting with you is so much fun." "Thanks," he laughed when he missed her hand and had to try again. His joy experienced another wobble right after, almost as if he was waiting for the other shoe to fall. Was he traumatized or something? He'd have to ask Dr. Sharma about that. For now, he'd just assume everything would be great from here on out. Nothing but good times for him and his friends. Although, if something was going to go wrong... He noticed Diego sitting in Mindy's makeup chair, even though the actors weren't in costume today. His boyfriend was smiling, which was a rare sight. Mindy was perched on one of the wardrobe tables while reading from a book. He felt a pang of envy and wondered if Diego would let him provide the same service. Ricky could ask, but that would probably make him seem like a pathetic copycat. He slowed for a moment, but not to catch them in the act. Ricky trusted his boyfriend. He merely wanted to confirm what was painfully obvious. Mindy and Diego still had chemistry. No surprise there. He'd had enough crushes on uninterested guys to know such feelings didn't fade quickly, if at all. Holding that against either of them would be unfair, since it couldn't be helped. "Hey," Ricky said when bounding over to join them. "What's going on?"
"Your timing's good," Diego said. "Mindy just got to a sappy part."
"Really? I want to hear."
"I don't," Diego murmured.
"Please?" Ricky pleaded. He leaned against his boyfriend casually, hoping that an arm would wrap around him, or that he'd be pulled onto his lap. Neither happened. "It's okay," Mindy said demurely as she placed a bookmark between the pages. "We'll keep going some other time." "Like when you're alone?" Ricky asked in concern, which was silly, because Mindy had willingly given up Diego. For him. "When a certain someone is feeling more receptive," she said pointedly. Then she perked up, her attention on Ricky as she smiled. "This would be a good time to try the costumes I've been working on." "For real?" he asked in excitement. Mindy nodded. "I think you're going to like this." She hopped off the table and pulled a pile of rumpled clothes toward her, sorting through them until she held up a shirt so filthy that it was stained yellow and brown. "This one is yours," she said, offering it to him. "Ew." Ricky crinkled his nose. "Do I really have to wear this?" "In the final act you do," she said. "Don't worry, it's not actually dirty." Ricky sniffed experimentally. "It smells like coffee." "That's what I used," Mindy said, sorting through the pile again. "And here's yours." She handed a shirt to Diego that was in absolute tatters.
"What did you use to make this?"
Diego demanded when holding it up.
"A paper shredder?"
"Jack goes hunting. His clothes have more wear. Try it on." Diego arched an eyebrow. Then he shrugged, took off his jacket, and peeled off his shirt. Mindy nudged Ricky and flashed him a naughty smile as Diego pulled the torn-up shirt over his head. Ricky barely glanced at her, too transfixed by those beefy biceps and the dark armpit hair. Although, even when wearing the shirt, plenty remained on display.
"What the hell?"
Diego complained when looking down at himself.
"I might as well be naked."
"Wait until you see the pants," Mindy said with a titter. Ricky laughed too. Diego considered them both before his demeanor changed.
"Is this what the audience wants?"
he asked, puffing up his chest. He moved through a sequence of casually seductive poses, like rubbing the back of his neck while flexing his arm, or stretching to make the shirt pull away from his waistline, revealing even more brown flesh. Diego reached for his zipper.
"Where are those pants you mentioned?"
"Around here somewhere," Mindy said, frantically tossing clothes into the air to find them. Ricky laughed at these antics, the tension having left him. Mindy was his friend. They both cared deeply for Diego. She wasn't his rival. "Jack and Ralph," they heard Keisha call. "You're needed on stage."
"That's me,"
Diego said.
"I might as well keep this thing on, what little there is."
"Thank you," Ricky said as they watched him walk away. "This play just got so much better." "I knew you'd like it," Mindy said as she began picking up the clothes she tossed around. Ricky hurried to help her. "Do you want to watch him rehearse together?" he offered. "Go ahead," she said with amusement. "I'm trying to cut back." Mindy was so wonderful. Ricky didn't detect a hint of animosity. He wasn't sure if he could have been so graceful had she been the winner. He hugged her spontaneously and then went to the wings so he could watch 3 castaway boys explore an island together. Miss DeVille interrupted the scene to give verbal notes, drawing his eye to the seats. That's when he noticed a familiar face. Galen was sitting by himself at the end of the row. He wasn't part of the theater group, although he had shown up not long ago to watch Ricky rehearse. That had been just before a date of sorts at the Kansas City Renaissance Festival, where Galen had sheepishly confessed his interest in Ricky, based on a wet dream of all things, which was flattering. Maybe something would have happened between them if Ricky hadn't been so heartbroken over Diego at the time. He sure looked cute, even in the limited light. Galen had a friendly face with thick features that complemented his stocky build, and he had a contagious smile. Ricky was reminded when hopping off the stage to join him.
"Hey,"
Galen whispered.
"Just the man I was looking for."
"Oh yeah?" Ricky asked, but not as quietly since this wasn't an official performance. Galen winced.
"Is it okay to talk here?"
"Yeah," Ricky said. Then he added, "Blah, blah, blah-bitty-blah," in demonstration. "See? Nobody cares." Galen laughed.
"You're definitely who I need."
Ricky eased down into the seat next to him. I don't know if you heard, but
you and Diego got back together,"
Galen said with a nod.
"I was happy when I found out. I, wouldn't mind keeping all that stuff we talked about between us. I think I was just
horny," Ricky supplied. Galen chuckled.
"Yeah, I mean, I'm still open to the idea because it was a really, really hot dream."
"Must have been," Ricky said, wanting the details.
"Yep, but that's not why I'm here. I came to invite you on a quest."
"A quest?" Ricky repeated. "I'm in."
"You haven't even heard the details."
"I don't care. It already sounds cool." Galen laughed.
"You might not think so once you're in mortal peril. I mentioned that I was thinking of starting my own campaign."
"As in Dungeons and Dragons?" This time he was so loud that they did attract attention.
"Uh-huh,"
Galen confirmed, pulling something out of his pocket.
"You'd have to commit to a 3-hour session each week. I'd expect you to learn your character inside out and take the game seriously, while still having fun, of course. If you think you can handle it."
He held out an empty palm, closing his fingers around it. When he opened them again, a tiny plastic sword appeared, the kind used to spear fruit chunks in a cocktail. "Wow," Ricky said. "Neat trick."
"So, you're interested?"
Galen asked. "I pledge my unwavering allegiance to your quest," Ricky said solemnly before taking the sword. Galen grinned in response.
"Awesome. I had the best idea while sitting here, too. Watching you and your friends act made me realize that you're perfect for the game. My dad and me, we always do character voices. We get really into it. Like a performance. Well, you saw what I'm like."
Galen had gotten dressed up as a wizard for the Renaissance Festival and had done battle with an evil rogue, even breathing fire as part of the performance.
"The guys I've been playing with since junior high are too reserved,"
Galen continued.
"I want the first campaign I run to really come to life."
He held out an empty palm again, but this time when he made a fist, he tapped it 4 times before opening it to reveal just as many swords.
"Do you think any of your theater friends would be interested?"
"Oh my God," Ricky cried. "That was amazing. And yeah, I'm sure my friends will be into this too. Wait, I should have said, oh my goddess, because I'm thinking of playing a cleric." They discussed options until Ricky was called on stage again. Galen had left by the time rehearsals had finished, but that was all right. They'd already exchanged numbers and promised to talk more about it on the phone. Ricky was ridiculously excited. He'd always wanted to play D&D, and this is exactly what he and Diego needed, their own special activity. Except instead of reading to each other, they'd be setting off on fantastic adventures, slaying evil hordes of monsters, and stuffing their tunics full of plundered gold. He rushed backstage to share the news, disappointed to see that Diego had changed back into his normal shirt. Maybe if he asked nicely, Mindy would let him borrow the full costume. They could come up with a happier ending to the play while alone in his bedroom. "Guess what?" he said, approaching them with a plastic sword extended. "Galen is running his own Dungeons and Dragons campaign, and he asked me to join. Better yet," he revealed the other swords, splaying them out. "There's room for more." Mindy gasped. "That sounds fun!" Before he could stop her, she plucked one of the swords. No big deal. Ricky offered the rest to Diego, who looked at him like he belonged in the loony bin.
"Isn't that some kind of nerdy make-believe game?"
"Yes," Ricky said. "Just like acting. You'll be great at it."
"Pass,"
Diego said while shrugging on his jacket. "Oh, come on," Mindy whined. "We'll have so much fun." That was his line, but at least she was arguing the same case.
"Who else is playing?"
Diego asked. "People you like," Ricky said, desperate to seal the deal. "I'll make sure of it."
"I don't know."
"That's fine," Ricky said with a dramatic sigh. "I was looking forward to all the time we'd spend together, but at least I'll be with Galen." Diego snorted.
"Are you trying to make me jealous?"
"Just because he wants my body? Of course not." Diego narrowed his eyes.
"Did he really say that?"
"Yes. I had to remind him that we're dating again. But you can trust me, even though I do think he's really hot." "Galen is a cutie," Mindy said with a titter. "I'll be a good chaperone and make sure he keeps his hands to himself."
"You're both ridiculous,"
Diego said as he walked away. "But you love us?" Ricky asked while catching up to him. He pressed one of the plastic swords flat against his palm before taking his boyfriend's hand. "And you'll play with us?" Diego felt the foreign object there and turned his hand over to reveal the sword.
"Looks like I don't have a choice."
"Yay!" Ricky cried while leaping around him. Mindy was a few steps behind, thrusting her tiny sword into an imaginary enemy. So much for their own special activity. 3 was a crowd. 4, on the other hand... Ricky glanced over his shoulder, recognizing again just how pretty Mindy was. Getting over someone was difficult. Moving on to someone else was easier. He still had 3 swords to distribute. Ricky would make sure they all went to eligible bachelors. November 11th, 1993. Keisha slowly navigated through woods that even hunters and hikers steered clear of, assuming they paid attention to the no trespassing signs posted along the perimeter. Her parents had bought this land some years back for future development. So far they hadn't done anything with it. She had, though. If only they knew how profitable that decision had been. Somehow she didn't think they would be pleased. Keisha stopped to get her bearings. She never took the same route when making this journey, but only because it was easy to get turned around. If she went too far east, the creek would halt her. Too far west, and she'd end up in a field. If she stayed between those landmarks while heading north... The steadily fading daylight grew brighter ahead. Keisha angled herself to slip between thick brush and stepped onto a road that was little more than 2 dirt tracks lined by withered weeds. She checked her watch and sighed, her breath visible in the chilly air. Then she hustled to an old cattle gate and struggled with the rusty padlock. She had just gotten the gate open when she heard a car coming down the adjoining gravel road. Nobody had any business driving down these back roads, making an unexpected visitor unlikely, but she was cautious regardless and took sanctuary beneath the shadow of a tree. Sure enough, a Trans Am with mismatched panels slowed, gravel crunching beneath its tires until it turned onto the dirt road. Keisha took a few steps forward so she could be seen. The passenger side window rolled down, revealing a rugged face she saw all too often as of late.
"Need a lift?"
Diego asked. "I suppose it's better than waiting for the bus. Just a sec." Keisha closed the cattle gate and locked it again, which was probably unnecessary, but she didn't want the risk. Especially now, when they were taking so many. You don't usually need to restock this soon, she said, voicing these concerns after getting inside the car.
People missed me when I was locked up over the summer,
Diego replied easily as he resumed driving.
I had a lot of catching up to do. It's been good for business.
He reached into his leather jacket. Not here, Keisha hissed. We keep that part of the business separate, remember? It would be damning enough if the police caught us out here with a stockpile of weed. A wad of cash would finish painting the picture for 'em.
Suit yourself,
Diego said.
Just stop by the garage when you're ready for payday.
It's too late now, Keisha said after a moment's hesitation. It'll look bad no matter which of us they find it on. Diego smirked and handed her a roll of cash. Keisha began peeling off bills while counting mentally. I trust you, she paused to explain. I just love seeing all these dead presidents.
Benjamin Franklin was never one, Diego replied. People say he was too old to run for the office, but I think he was too smart. Hamilton wasn't a president either, just the treasurer, and a founding father.
Keisha looked over in surprise. I didn't realize that you're a history buff. Diego shrugged.
It's one of the classes I hate the least. I like being reminded that people have always been self-serving bastards. It's reassuring.
She studied his face a moment before she resumed counting. Keisha was never quite sure what to make of him. Still waters might run deep, but beneath Diego's choppy surface was one hell of an undertow. That's why she had decided to trust him back when this enterprise began. She had been smoking a joint in the woods next to the school when he showed up.
I followed my nose,
he'd said when reaching for the joint.
But your secret is safe with me.
Keisha had watched him inhale with practiced skill, the tragedy of his past on her mind, because anyone who lost a parent that way deserved a coping mechanism.
Who's your dealer?
He'd asked when passing the joint back to her. Despite being obsessed with 21 Jump Street freshman year, she hadn't worried that he might be a narc. I grew it myself, she admitted after exhaling.
Oh, yeah?
Diego had seemed impressed after taking another hit.
This shit packs a punch.
Farming is in my blood, she'd replied. To my detriment, I only wanted to grow enough for myself. I don't know what I'm going to do with the rest.
That's easy.
Diego had offered her a 20.
Start selling.
I'm not a drug dealer, Keisha had replied, ignoring the money. And even if I was, there isn't enough time in the day.
How much are we talking here?
Enough that I don't want to become a victim of my own success. I plan on burning some leaves soon. It'll be a long time before Bambi and her family come down again. I can hook you up before that happens, on the house. She'd given him an ounce later that week. He came back not long after with a decent chunk of change.
This belongs to you,
he'd said.
A mechanic I work with wanted to buy some. A couple of his friends were interested too. Hell, I know enough people that I could probably move the rest of what you've got, if you haven't burned it already.
She'd been unable to bring herself to do so, especially after calculating the potential value. The thought of all that profit going up in smoke had seemed downright wasteful. Selling it was a more discreet way to dispose of the surplus, or so she had convinced herself. Keisha entered into the new arrangement cautiously, establishing ground rules that she hoped would keep them both out of trouble. No selling to anyone at their school. While there, they didn't know each other. No picking up and dropping off at the same time. This had gotten them through the first year so successfully that it seemed a shame not to plant a fresh crop when spring rolled around again. And why not? They had an airtight system in place. The money in her hand suggested otherwise. They were getting sloppy. Diego wasn't the only one to blame. Keisha had given weed to Hope. Cops had been called to the party where it was smoked. That was already too close for comfort. When the Trans Am's headlights illuminated a dilapidated old barn, She imagined the DEA surrounding it with a SWAT team while she and Diego were busy hanging up next year's harvest to dry. She wordlessly led the way inside and lit a lantern, creating enough light to watch Diego go to the floorboards in one corner. "Still reeks of weed in here," Keisha said uneasily.
"Smells like mildew to me,"
Diego said, slamming a boot down on a loose board so the opposite side would lift. He grabbed this and pulled, revealing cobwebs and shadow. "I suppose I could burn some sage," she murmured, mostly to herself, as she watched him get down and shove an arm into the opening. "Aren't you scared of spiders?"
"My hand looks like a giant tarantula to them, so no."
Diego pulled out a sealed ball jar filled with green buds. He passed this up to her. She set it on an old canning table and waited. "You haven't been selling to anyone at school, have you?" Keisha asked. Diego eyed her while rooting around.
"Nope. Like I said, people ran out while I was gone. Now they're stocking up on more than they really need. Demand will slow down again. Don't worry."
"Do I seem worried?" Diego handed her another jar.
"Yeah, you do. Probably because of the helicopter that followed my car here."
"What?" Diego snorted.
"I'm kidding. Relax. The feds don't care about a couple of teenagers selling weed."
Says the guy who spent 3 months locked up for a prank. I'm more concerned about local police. They've obviously got nothing better to do. Diego pulled out 2 more jars and stood.
"Yeah, you're right. They probably would get off on arresting us. Is that what has you so jumpy? You think they're keeping tabs on me because of what happened?"
She shook her head. "I just don't want to get sloppy. Does anyone know?"
"About us?
"That you sell weed," she pressed.
"Of course,"
Diego said dismissively.
"That's sort of how it works."
"Does anyone at our school know?" she clarified.
"Why are you giving me the 3rd degree?"
"How come you're avoiding the question?" Diego scowled at her, then he shrugged.
"Ricky knows."
Keisha grabbed the jars he was holding. "That's against the rules."
"So what? The risk is mine to take. Like I said, he doesn't know about you. Ricky wouldn't think to wonder where it comes from."
"I don't like it," Keisha said, shaking her head. "This isn't good."
"So you're either psychic and knew there was something to worry about even before I got here," Diego grumbled, "or you have a guilty conscience."
Her shoulders slumped. "I've been hooking Sylvia up, and, I gave some to Hope. Cops busted the party that her friends were smoking it at."
"Does she know that you grew it?"
Keisha shook her head.
"Then you're fine."
Diego's brow furrowed.
"Wait, does she know about me?"
"Now who's getting worried?" she shot back. "But no, I told her I buy it from some college guy."
"Uh-huh. If the cops come to your door, make sure to specify that he goes to community college."
"Why's that?"
"Because people with rich parents don't need to resort to such things."
He twisted the lid off one of the jars and inhaled. Then his golden eyes met hers.
"Speaking of which, I've never understood why you do this."
"And yet you keep asking." He shrugged.
"Haven't I earned your trust by now?"
"It's not that." She could already imagine what he'd think of her reason, and how he might take it personally if she kept it from him any longer.
"Are you planning on running away or something?"
Diego prompted. "Yeah, basically."
"Well, fuck. In that case, let's pool our resources. I've been saving up to open my own garage in El Paso. I'll fix the cars and you can run the rest."
Keisha shook her head. "That's exactly what I'm running away from. Responsibility. Thanksgiving is coming up. Most people stuff themselves full of turkey and nod off in front of the television. I'll be prepping a gigantic meal the day before, serving it to hundreds of people the next, and still be cleaning up the day after that. Christmas is even more involved, and don't even get me started on Halloween. Her stomach lurched with guilt. What had happened to Anthony wasn't her fault, but Keisha still felt like she'd failed him. She should have insisted that they stick together when running through the maze. She would have kicked Troy's teeth in. "I love my family," she said. "I have nothing but respect for the way they serve the community. You're right that I come from a place of privilege, but I've never taken it for granted. My parents wouldn't let me. All that having been said, I'm still a human being, and I need something for me." She placed a hand over her chest and felt her heart thumping with conviction. "So after I graduate, I'm taking my half of the money and leaving. Just for a year." Diego cocked his head.
"Where to?"
"New York City. I've got it all figured out. How much I'll need for rent and food each month. I don't really have a plan other than that. I'd like to soak up the culture and break a few hearts, but mostly I want to find out who I am when everything else is stripped away. Does that make sense?" Diego nodded.
"Yeah. For some of us, the process isn't a choice."
Of course. His father was dead, and from what she'd heard, he didn't have the best relationship with his mom. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to—" He shook his head.
"It's not a bad thing. More people should go through that. It helps you see the world clearly. And, yourself. Sometimes I still want to be swaddled up in a warm blanket like a blissful, ignorant baby. But those people are gonna get dropped on their heads when the shit goes down. Get that wake-up call out of the way now instead of later, you know?"
She didn't. Not really. He made it sound like a terrifying prospect, which, for whatever reason, only made her want it more.
"So we're good?"
Diego asked, gathering up the jars. "Sure are," Keisha assured him, the potential reward having chased away any lingering concerns. He went to load up the car. She hid the rest of the weed beneath a blanket, freezing temperatures due any day now, before returning the floorboard to its rightful place.
"Hop in,"
Diego said when she rejoined him outside. "No way. We keep the money and the stash separate, remember?" He nodded toward the woods.
"It's awfully dark to go wandering around by yourself."
"I'm not scared." Diego reappraised her.
"If you weren't such a badass, I never would have signed up for this."
She smiled in response. "I'm rather fond of you myself. We've just got to be careful, especially now that we eat lunch together and are both in the theater group."
"I can quit doing both if you want."
"No," Keisha said instantly. "Are you kidding me? I'd drop theater before I'd let you do so. You're too damn talented." He scrunched up his face like she wasn't making sense. "You realize that, don't you?" she asked. Diego shook his head.
"I'm just there to have fun. You sure about that ride?"
"I'll go with you to the gate. After that, you're on your own. I don't care how dark it is. You'll have to face your fears." He laughed. A few minutes later, she was standing on one side of the closed gate, watching taillights disappear down a gravel road. Keisha glanced around in the wake of silence. Once certain she was alone, she began the walk home through the woods. But instead of trees surrounding her, she imagined buildings so impossibly tall that they blocked out the horizon, making her feel small, insignificant, and most of all, free. Chapter 4, November 12th, 1993. Cameron clenched his jaw at the sound of Troy's voice, wanting nothing more than to silence him with a fist. The violence inside him felt alien, like a virus, and yet he didn't have the motivation to purge it from his mind. Only their surroundings kept him in check. They were gathered in the student government classroom, the desks arranged in a circle, with all of them facing the center, and each other. They were, of course, tackling very important issues. Bullying? Homophobia? Accountability? No. They were gathered here, after school, to decide on the theme for prom.
People want to have a good time,
Troy was saying with an air of authority.
They don't want to feel like they got suckered into attending another class. My girlfriend has the right idea.
He shook his head.
Sorry, the head of the events committee has the right idea?
He looked at Cameron meaningfully. Probably because he'd foolishly granted her that title when choosing his cabinet. Troy was now the student representative, a disturbing thought, considering the violence he'd perpetrated against one of them. A dance should be romantic, Faith stated, leaving no room for debate. Maybe we can do both, Jenny, his science-loving vice president, countered. People are said to have chemistry when they're in love. Let's play on that. We could have the periodic table as the dance floor and use different molecular structures as decorations. They'll look like baubles hanging from the ceiling. Oh, and people could drink punch out of beakers instead of cups. That sounds fun, Cameron said. It sounds boring, Faith countered with a scoff. Well, it's way more than what you've offered, Cameron snapped. All you've said is that there should be lots of lights. Lights are pretty, Faith stated, her tone implying that he was dense.
Is everyone ready to vote on it?
Troy asked, looking around for support. That's my call, Cameron said. We don't have two solid concepts yet. Let me know once you've come up with something more meaningful than lots of lights, and then we'll hold a vote. Cool, Troy said as if he didn't really care. The weekend is here anyway. We can make Faith's idea official on Monday. That's awfully presumptuous, Cameron shot back. Troy shrugged. I know what people want. Is this the end of the session? Sylvia asked, looking up from the notebook she used to document the minutes of the meeting. Yes, he said through gritted teeth. Session adjourned. The room began to clear out. Cameron remained where he was while glaring at Troy. Was it crazy to challenge him to a fight? Would that make things better or worse? Probably the latter. Besides, Cameron wasn't sure he could restrain himself enough to not kill the bastard. Something wrong? Troy asked when noticing his stare. Yeah, Cameron said. How would you feel if I beat up your girlfriend? Troy made a face. What the hell is wrong with you? He put a protective arm around Faith and guided her out of the classroom. Sorry, Sylvia said when walking over to join him. But did you just threaten to beat up a girl? Do not put that in the meeting notes, Cameron said before sighing. I was only trying to communicate the position he's put me in. Is Troy so deluded that he doesn't understand why I hate him? If I had to guess, Sylvia said, he probably thinks his actions are justified. I'm not willing to delve any deeper into his psyche than that, because I hate him too. Do you need a ride? He noticed Laverne, the school's vice president and the teacher of this class, watching him with expectation from the front of the room. No, I need to stay a little longer, but thanks. Say hi to Anthony if you see him. I will, Sylvia replied. He's filling in for me at work. Wait, did he get a job? Nothing so official. My boss doesn't know. Anthony is thrilled. I bet. Watch your back, Sylvia. He'll do anything it takes to make the arrangement permanent. She laughed and said goodbye. Cameron collected himself and reported to the front of the class. You handled the voting issue well, Laverne said. A vague concept isn't enough to make an informed decision. When are we going to ratify the anti-discrimination policy? He insisted. I don't care about the dance. You should, Laverne replied. It's an important issue to many of your constituents. As for the anti-discrimination policy, you and I need to make some revisions before approaching the school board. How about now? He asked. Laverne shook her head. I respect your drive and determination, but I'm eager to begin the weekend. Aren't you? Cameron shrugged. Then he swallowed because what he needed to say next wasn't easy. I think it's only fair to tell you that once the anti-discrimination policy is in place, I intend to hand in my resignation as student council president. Laverne was clearly taken aback by this news.
May I ask why? I can't work with Troy. We have, I don't know, I guess you'd call them irreconcilable differences.
The vice principal studied him a moment.
Does this have something to do with the tense exchange at the end of the meeting?
Cameron blanched.
You heard that?
Laverne nodded. What's going on?
Nothing that happened on school property.
That doesn't mean there can't be consequences. Is this something the police should get involved in? He clamped his mouth shut and shook his head, even though he wanted to tell her everything.
I see, Laverne said, leaning back with a sigh.
Well, while you're still president, I challenge you to explore how much good you can do.
By voting on a stupid dance?
Potentially, Laverne said without a trace of irony. Troy isn't likely to meet you halfway on an issue like the dress code. He's got his heels dug in too deep. The prom theme presents an opportunity to find a way of working together.
What if I don't want to get along with him?
Then things will very likely get worse. War is the absence of diplomacy. She taught him that already. Cameron really didn't want to see anyone else get hurt. Not again.
How am I supposed to work with someone I hate? He asked, not hiding his desperation.
In politics, there are two methods. The most common is to make concessions in exchange for getting what you want. Policies of exclusive interest to each party are bundled into a bill. If you give us this, we'll give you that. However, a much more clever approach, and in my experience the most effective, is to find different reasons for wanting the same thing. Take a green energy bill, for instance. The Democrats might want it put into legislation for environmental reasons. The Republicans might want to decrease reliance on foreign oil while American companies profit from the new innovations.
I like that, Cameron said, but I'm not sure how it applies to my situation.
I didn't say it was the easier option. Finding common ground takes careful consideration. You'll have to learn what motivates the other party. That's a useful life skill, even outside of politics.
I'll give it some thought, he promised.
Good. One more request? Only decide if you still want to be president when the time comes. I won't delay the anti-discrimination policy artificially. It's too important. But until then, don't be a president who knows he's on the way out. Hold on to the belief that you can change the world for the better, because you truly can, even here. Cameron nodded, too emotional to reply. He desperately wanted to buy into what she was saying, but Anthony's fate had shaken his faith in humanity, although he hadn't lost it completely. Not yet. For now, he would try. November 14th, 1993. Omar followed Whitney into her bedroom while mentally repeating a mantra to keep himself strong. Be a dick to get out quick. That's all he had to do, aside from resisting the seductive space around him. Whitney's bedroom even smelled girly. He loved being here, but not as much as he loved Sylvia, who had never welcomed him into her bedroom. He'd been to her place only once, after inviting himself over. Early days. He knew now why she was so private. Omar felt protective of his family, too, so that was one more thing they had in common. But it would be helpful if he could at least envision her bedroom now, instead of the one he was in. Would it be weird if he asked Sylvia to take a photo of it? Yeah, definitely. He'd be better off peeping through her window. Not while whacking it or anything crazy. He just wanted to see. I love it here, Whitney said, twirling around the middle of her room with her arms spread wide.
So do I,
Omar admitted, before remembering his mission. Be a dick to get out quick.
But I would definitely make some changes.
Like what? Whitney asked, pivoting to face him.
Are you kidding?
He asked, as if it was obvious, when really he was buying time.
You don't even have your own TV. How lame is that?
Whitney shrugged. I just go downstairs when I want to watch something. She didn't look the slightest bit offended. He really needed to up his game. Kinda smells bad in here, too, he said, which he instantly hated himself for, because it was an outright lie. Whitney sniffed. Then she turned to face the cage that held 2 guinea pigs. Maybe I need to change their bedding. Want to help? Sure, he said before catching himself. When hell freezes over. Do you think it ever will? Whitney asked, tilting her head. Because that would be worse. I like fire, but I don't like being cold. I'm not sure, he admitted. My family is Muslim, and our version of the devil is made of fire, which sounds really cool. It does, Whitney said. I didn't realize that you're a Muslim. Does that freak you out? If so, maybe he'd actually start practicing his religion. Nope. Damn. Do you think your parents would approve? I'm not sure, Whitney replied. My family is spiritual instead of religious, which is great because it means you can believe whatever you want. Like, I think God must be a woman, because the Bible says we're made in his image, but men can't give birth. So if God is the one who made us, then he's gotta be a goddess instead. Wow, you're right, Omar said, tempted to worship at her feet. What a cool observation, from the person he was supposed to be alienating. Although a woman can't make a baby on her own, so maybe God has a wife that nobody knows about, because she's always barefoot and pregnant in the kitchen. Sick burn. He felt a burst of pride that withered to shame when he saw the wounded expression on her face. I didn't make fun of your religion, she replied. Sorry, he said. Be a dick to get out quick. For nothing. Whitney studied him a moment longer before turning her back and squatting in front of the guinea pig cage. God, this sucked. He should just get it over with now. Want to play with the 2 little piggies? She asked. I like how we made them have dinner together last week. They'd piled snacks on the floor and each gotten behind one of the guinea pigs to provide a voiceover, creating polite conversation in silly voices. I hope these cashews don't go straight to my hips. I have a hot date this weekend. Do you feel drunk? I think this cabbage is fermented. You're right. We'll have to get a piggyback ride home. It was so dumb and incredibly fun. As much as he would like to lose himself in more good times together, Omar wanted Sylvia back even more. I don't want to play with Hardy and Costello, he said. They're dumb. Whitney gasped in shock. How could you say that? Because it's true, Omar said, whipping himself into a frenzy so he wouldn't have to feel bad. I've never met stupider creatures in my life. And another thing. He pointed a trembling finger at a poster of Enya. Her music sucks. Even my mom wouldn't be caught dead listening to that crap. You know what else? What? Whitney challenged with a scowl. He couldn't bring himself to criticize her personally. The things she loved, on the other hand. National Geographic, he said, marching over to a neatly organized shelf of magazines. How old are you? Because the sort of people who read this crap used to take a horse and buggy to the mall when needing to buy a new record for their phonograph. You mean the Amish? Whitney asked in confusion. No, I mean grandmas and stuff. Ugh. Words failed him, so he grabbed a bunch of the magazines, intending to throw them over his shoulder. Then he imagined her crying while picking them up after he'd gone. Deciding he wouldn't be able to live with himself, Omar shoved the magazines back on the shelf, but not in order. That would teach her. In fact, he'd mess them all up. What are you doing? Whitney said from behind him. Don't try and stop me, he warned. I'm a bad kid. You don't want any part of this. He grabbed magazines from the end of the row and moved them to the beginning instead. He was a madman. Omar! What? He spun around, an issue in each hand, certain that Whitney would tell him to leave and never come back. Come here. She didn't sound angry. He narrowed his eyes in suspicion. I don't want to. Whitney sighed. I asked my dad once why boys are so angry. He said it's because you're expected to bury your feelings, and when that goes on too long, eventually it all explodes. Is that how you feel now? Kind of, he admitted with raw vulnerability. Do you want a hug?
Yeah,
He croaked. Oh, come here. He walked over to her, feeling small and foolish, but he did like the way her arms wrapped around him. Now tell me how you feel.
I really like how your room smells, and I love your guinea pigs, he blubbered. I want God to be a woman. That would be so much better. And I think it's really cool that you read National Geographic. I wish I was into stuff like that. I'm really sorry.
It's okay, Whitney said. It can't be easy being a boy.
It's really not,
he said sullenly. Whitney leaned back. Will it make you feel better to kiss them? His eyes darted down to her breasts.
I mean, if you're offering.
Whitney let go of him and bounded over to the guinea pig cage. So that's what she meant. Omar joined her, sheepishly accepting Hardy when the little guy was handed to him.
I hope I didn't hurt their feelings.
Don't worry, Whitney said, nuzzling her nose against Costello's furry body. They don't actually understand what we say. Believe me, I've interviewed them extensively and even accused them of being Russian spies. They never react.
Neither would actual spies, Omar pointed out.
They exchanged knowing glances over the heads of the guinea pigs. If national security issues ever came up, they'd have to leave her room and discuss them elsewhere.
I really am sorry, Omar said. I kind of freaked out.
No harm done, Whitney said. I love putting my magazines in order. Sometimes I lay them all out on the floor to see the covers, but in random order, just so I can organize them again. Omar sighed, wistfully, because he really did like her, although it wasn't love. Something close, but not the real deal. He was still stuck in a relationship he didn't know how to end, but he wouldn't try being cruel again. Omar couldn't stomach it, and Whitney deserved better. He'd have to find some other way out, even if it meant telling her the truth. November 16th, 1993. As the woods closed in around him, Ricky took a deep breath and tried to ignore his rising panic, determined to set a good example. They were here to confront fear, or at least plan for the inevitability. He glanced over at Anthony and forced a grin, but judging from his friend's response, it must have looked more like a grimace. "How's your xylophobia these days?" his friend asked. "I've got it under control," Ricky said, before glancing around nervously. "But if you weren't here, and especially if it was night, I'd already be running the other way." Anthony smiled. "What exactly are we doing here?" They were in the wooded lot next to the school. Most students used it as a place to smoke or to mess around. Ricky had other plans. "I'm sure you remember what happened the last time we were out here together," he said leadingly. "I know what you wanted to happen," Anthony said, "and that I got in the way of it." "That's the important part," Ricky said. "Diego's cock?" Ricky giggled. "No, that's my favorite part, aside from his heart." "Aw," Anthony cooed. "He's the lucky one. I hope you know that." Ricky smiled in appreciation before briskly shaking his head to clear it. Now wasn't the time to get distracted by love. The romantic variety, anyway. He felt enough platonic love for his friend that sleep had been elusive for the past week. Ricky lying there while unwillingly imagining what Anthony had gone through in the cornfield. How terrifying it must have felt to be chased into the dark and attacked. Ricky often inserted himself into the scenario, coming to Anthony's rescue before the bastards managed to hurt him. That was impossible without a time machine. They could only travel to the future in the same way everyone else did. Day by day, minute by minute. And if something similar happened, he wanted Anthony to be able to save himself. "We've come a long way since we were here last," Ricky said, following the path as it branched off and ended in a clearing. "We weren't even friends yet." "True," Anthony said with a nod. "Although I still liked you enough to follow you in here, thinking that Diego was going to do something bad." "He only wanted something really bad," Ricky said with a grin before making himself focus. "I'm sure you remember what happened when he ran off and you tried to stop me from following?" Yeah." Anthony rubbed his lower back as if it still hurt. "You threw me to the ground like I was a rag doll." there's no reason you can't do the same. I found a place in town that teaches judo and checked them out. We could take classes together and... He trailed off because Anthony was already shaking his head. What? I'm not into sports, Anthony said. Or anything athletic. Besides, don't they make you practice falling down at those places? I had my fill of that over the summer when Omar tried teaching me to skate. Ask him. He'll tell you that I'm hopeless. Anthony glanced around the empty clearing. You really brought me out here because of that? I could be hanging out in the record store right now while criticizing Billboard's Hot 100. That's something I'm actually good at. Because you've practiced, or studied, I guess, by listening to so much music. Martial arts are the same way. I didn't take judo very long, and look what I managed to do. I'm a wimp, Anthony replied while swatting at a falling leaf. He missed. A toddler could take me on and win. Ricky sighed. I knew you'd say that. Am I so predictable? No, I asked Omar what you'd think of the idea. Oh. Anthony trained a patient expression on him. I get what you're trying to do, and it's sweet, but it's not worth the effort. I already have a whole slew of bodyguards. We can't always be there, Ricky said. I want you to feel safe, even when you're alone. I'd buy some pepper spray if I thought it would help. Graham is so mean he probably gargles with that stuff every morning. I could take him. Anthony scoffed. I doubt that. You don't believe me? He weighs more than both of us combined, so no. Fine. Ricky checked his watch. Anthony studied him in concern. Don't tell me you invited him here. Nope, just someone his size. Rustling caught their attention. Diego stepped into the clearing, looking just as confused as Anthony, who became the center of his attention.
What's he doing here? This is like a bad rerun.
Your guess is as good as mine, Anthony replied, not seeming to take his reaction personally. I need you to help prove something, Ricky said.
Oh, yeah?
Diego looked back and forth between them before shrugging.
What exactly?
That I can kick your ass. Diego laughed without humor.
I don't think so.
Ricky kept his tone cool as his expression. Then prove it. You were on the football team, right? Try to tackle me. Diego shook his head.
I don't want to hurt you.
You won't.
Yeah, I will.
Ricky shrugged. Then I'll have learned my lesson. I don't think you can do it, though. Diego crossed his arms over his considerable chest.
No fucking way.
Why not? You don't think I'm athletic enough? I wiped the field with you when we played soccer and PE.
I was drunk.
I've played football before, Ricky said dismissively. I'm not scared of getting tackled.
This isn't gym class. Even the big boys wear protective gear. Without it, I'd crush you like an aluminum can.
Please listen to him, Ricky, Anthony interjected. Diego rounded on him.
Don't start agreeing with me. That only pisses me off more.
Anthony rolled his eyes and shrugged. Never mind, Ricky said with a theatrical sigh. I should have known your ego couldn't handle it. I'll ask Graham to help me instead. Diego's face twisted up.
He hates your guts.
Good, he jutted out his jaw. That's better than you treating me like a delicate flower.
Fine.
Diego rotated his shoulders like he was loosening up.
Your parents are really gonna love me when I put you in the hospital. Ready?
Ricky would prefer to be farther away, but attackers rarely took convenience into consideration. Go for it. Diego shook his head, then he charged, but it looked more like he intended to loop an arm around his waist to carry him away. Ricky grabbed one of his wrists and pulled so Diego would keep going past him, which he did. Ricky remained in place. Diego nearly lost his balance.
What the hell was that?
He asked when turning around in surprise. Boring, Ricky replied drolly. Stop holding back. You'd call that being fake.
I call it mercy,
Diego growled, his features hardening.
Get ready. This is gonna hurt.
When he charged again, he clearly meant business. Diego kept low to the ground, leading with his right shoulder. Ricky went into a stance that provided better stability, aligning himself and pulling on Diego's shirt so he couldn't avoid the leg that darted out to trip him. His technique was messy, Diego only stumbling instead of falling outright, but the look of shock on his face was soon replaced by cold determination. "Stop holding back," Ricky repeated, mostly to goad him on.
I wasn't,
Diego growled before launching toward him suddenly. This time, Ricky managed to grab his lapel and jacket sleeve, which was enough for him to turn and twist, using his own body like a boulder that Diego rolled over before landing on his back. "Holy shit," Anthony said, leaping up and down at the edge of the clearing. "You got him."
What the hell did I ever do to you?
Diego groaned while still on the ground. Ricky leapt on him, but only to kiss his face in quick succession. "I'm so sorry. I had to show him that it was possible." Diego shoved him away.
Let me up.
Ricky helped him to his feet. Diego wiped at his nose while glaring.
I shouldn't have held back.
"You didn't."
Maybe. You'll never know.
Anthony started laughing. "Do you see?" Ricky said, wanting to capitalize on the moment. "You use the other person's balance and inertia against them. You don't have to be big or strong. We can take the class together. I still have a lot to learn." "I would love to do that to Graham," Anthony admitted. "So will you?" "I'll think about it."
I just got my ass handed to me,
Diego grumbled.
And you're going to think about it? Come on, man. Even I'm tempted to sign up for whatever the hell this is.
"Okay," Anthony said. "I'll at least try."
Good,
Diego huffed.
If you learn fast enough, maybe I won't have to walk your dumbass to class anymore.
"I'll let that motivate me," Anthony said dryly. "So, are we done now? Can I go play?" "Yeah," Ricky said. "I'll call you later so we can figure out the details." "All right," Anthony smirked. "Have fun, you two."
It's been a real blast so far,
Diego muttered. "Sorry," Ricky whispered as Anthony walked away. "I knew you wouldn't go along with it if I asked ahead of time, and I worried he would think it was all staged."
What exactly? Diego asked. Are you some sort of karate kid?
No, but I did have a crush on Ralph Macchio when I was growing up.
Seriously? What was that?
Judo. I want Anthony to be able to protect himself. Diego peered in the direction he'd gone and nodded.
Not a bad idea, even though the sales pitch sucked, for me at least.
"I hope I didn't bruise your ego," Ricky said with a titter.
You did,
Diego said with bedroom eyes.
Want a kiss and make it all better?
We never did get to finish what we... The wind was knocked out of Ricky before he could say more. He found himself draped over Diego's shoulder, an arm wrapping around his waist to ensure he remained there.
Fuck yeah,
his boyfriend shouted victoriously while carrying him around like a prize.
Take that, Daniel-san.
I wasn't ready, Ricky gasped.
Then you better take that class, because for now, I'm the boss. Understand?
Ricky nodded when he was placed on his feet again, but he didn't remain there. He got on his knees. I understand.
Good.
Diego placed his hand on his hips.
Now prove it.
Ricky smiled up at him before reaching for Diego's belt, all too happy to comply. The story continues as an audiobook, ebook, or paperback available at your favorite retailer. Visit jbellbooks.com to learn more.